The manager publicly punched the billionaire's black husband. Then he begged for mercy, but it was too late. Richard Morrison's fist connected with David's jaw with a crack that echoed through the crowded shopping center. Children screamed. Cell phones instantly went up to record, and a circle of onlookers formed around the shocking scene that had just exploded in the food court of the Beverly Center. "Learn to stay in your place," shouted Richard, regional manager of the platinum fashion chain of stores, adjusting his expensive suit as David staggered backward, his hand instinctively going to his sore face. "People like you shouldn't even be here." David Williams was 34 years old and never imagined that a simple trip to the mall to pick up his wife's birthday present would end with him being publicly assaulted by a man he had never seen before in his life. The metallic taste of blood spread across his mouth as he regained his balance, his dark eyes maintaining a disturbing calm that contrasted with the chaos around him. It had all started 15 minutes earlier when David had tried to enter the platinum fashion boutique to buy a bag he had seen online. The security guard at the door, instructed by Richard, had barred him from entering with a "sorry, but this store isn't for your type of customer." When David politely asked what that meant, the situation quickly escalated. "You know exactly what it means," Richard had said, stepping out from behind the counter with an arrogance that made his employees cower. "This is a designer store. Our products cost more than you make in a year. Stop wasting our time and find something more suited to your budget." Now, with half the mall recording and Richard still bragging to onlookers about putting that intruder in his place, David simply wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand. His eyes revealed a serenity that only exists in those who have faced much worse storms and knew exactly how to survive them. What no one there could have imagined was that this seemingly vulnerable man held a secret too powerful to be revealed before the right time. And Richard Morrison, in his blind arrogance, had just made the biggest mistake of his entire life. If this story of prejudice and revenge touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Black Voices to find out how a simple moment of violence would become the catalyst for justice that no one would ever forget. Richard Morrison couldn't stop smiling as he adjusted his tie, feeling like a hero in front of the small crowd that had formed. The circle of onlookers grew by the second. Phones pointed to capture every moment of the humiliation he had orchestrated with such pleasure. "Did you see that?" he asked loudly to the spectators, pointing to David, who was still wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. "That's exactly how we treat intruders here at the Beverly Center. This is an area for people of quality, not for anyone who decides to show up." The store security guard, Marcus, a black man in his 50s, looked at the floor with obvious discomfort. He had worked at that mall for 15 years and had never witnessed anything so brutal and unnecessary. But Richard was his boss, and jobs weren't easy to come by at his age. "Mr. Morrison," Marcus tried to intervene discreetly. "Maybe we should call mall security to handle this in a more what?" Richard cut him off irritably. "More polite. Marcus, you should be thanking me for protecting our store from undesirable elements. Look at him." He gestured dramatically toward David. "Plain jeans, cheap sneakers, no expensive watch, no sign that he could afford even a wallet from our store. I just saved us from wasting time with someone who obviously has no money." David remained standing in the same spot, his hand still over his bruised face, but his eyes revealed something that bothered Marcus deeply. It wasn't anger, humiliation, or even fear. It was an almost disturbing calm, as if this situation were just another minor obstacle in a much more complex journey. What no one there knew was that David Williams had grown up on the most dangerous streets of Detroit, where surviving to the age of 18 was considered an achievement. At 12, he had already learned that fights were not won with anger, but with intelligence. At 15, he discovered that the most dangerous men were always the quietest. And at 20, when he got his first scholarship, he promised himself that he would never again let gratuitous violence define his destiny. "You know what bothers me the most?" Richard continued his performance for the cell phones recording him, clearly intoxicated by the attention. "It's that arrogance. He really thought he could walk into my store, pretend he had money to buy our products, and we would just accept that lie." An elderly woman in the group of onlookers shook her head in disapproval. "Young man, there was no need to hit the boy. He wasn't doing anything wrong." Richard laughed dismissively. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you don't understand how the luxury goods business works. We have to protect our real customers from embarrassing situations. Imagine if one of our regular buyers walked into the store and found this. He pointed again at David with obvious disgust. It was at that moment that David finally spoke, his voice low, but laden with an authority that made some of the onlookers lean forward to hear better. "Mr. Morrison," David said, pronouncing the name with a precision that made Richard frown. "You are filming this entire situation for your client's social media. Are you sure this is the image Platinum Fashion wants to project?" The question caught Richard off guard. How the hell did this man know his name? He didn't remember introducing himself, and his name tag was hidden under his suit jacket. "How do you know my name?" Richard asked, a slight note of uncertainty coloring his arrogant voice for the first time. David simply smiled. And it was a smile that made Marcus take a step back. It wasn't a smile of submission or fear. It was the smile of someone who had just seen his opponent make exactly the mistake he had been waiting for. "Let's just say I have a habit of finding out about the people I'm going to be interacting with," David replied calmly. "Especially when those people make decisions that can affect the reputation of entire companies." Richard felt an uncomfortable chill run up his spine, but he quickly dismissed the feeling. This was ridiculous. He was the regional manager of one of the most prestigious fashion chains in the country. This man was obviously bluffing. But before he could respond, sirens blared in the distance, and two mall security officers pushed through the crowd. "What's going on here?" one of them demanded, looking from Richard to David. Marcus stepped forward quickly. "This man," he pointed to Richard, "just assaulted this customer without provocation." Richard's face turned red. "That's a lie. He tried to enter the store without authorization." David raised a hand to stop the argument. "Officers, I have no problem showing you the security footage from the store entrance. I'm sure it will clarify everything." Richard's confidence faltered. The store cameras were his responsibility, and he knew they would show his aggressive behavior clearly. As the officers escorted Richard to the side to review the footage, David's phone rang. He answered with a quiet, "Yes, Catherine?" The voice on the other end was frantic. "David, I just saw the video online. Are you okay? I'm calling our lawyer now." David chuckled softly. "I'm fine, love. Just another day at the mall. Tell James to meet me here." Catherine, his wife, was the billionaire heiress of Williams Tech Solutions, a global tech conglomerate worth billions. David, despite his humble appearance, was not just her husband, he was the company's chief strategy officer, a position he had earned through years of brilliance and resilience. The security officers returned, their expressions grim. "Mr. Morrison, you're under arrest for assault. We have the footage, and several witnesses have given statements." Richard's face drained of color. "Wait, you don't understand. I was just doing my job." At that moment, James Crawford, the CEO of Platinum Fashion, arrived, his face a mixture of shock and fury as he took in the scene. "Richard, what the hell did you do?" he barked, turning to David with an apologetic look. "Mr. Williams, I am so sorry. This is a terrible misunderstanding." David nodded politely. "Mr. Crawford, I appreciate your concern, but this goes beyond a misunderstanding. Your manager assaulted me based on my appearance, and that reflects on your company's culture." Crawford swallowed hard. He knew David Williams by reputation, a man whose strategic decisions had revolutionized the tech industry. The fact that he was married to Catherine Williams, the billionaire behind Williams Tech Solutions, only amplified the gravity of the situation. "Please, let me make this right," Crawford pleaded. Richard acted alone. "The company will take full responsibility." David's calm demeanor didn't waver. "Mr. Crawford, I suggest you start by ensuring your employees are trained to show more professionalism and dignity in the last 10 minutes than your boss has in his entire career." Crawford pulled out his cell phone and began dialing frantically. "I need to call the company president immediately. David, please tell me we can work this out." "James," David said calmly. "I'm not a vindictive person, but your employee not only physically assaulted me, he did so based purely on racial and class prejudice in public while representing your company." He gestured to the cell phones, still recording. "This isn't just about me. It's about the message Platinum Fashion is sending to the world." Catherine watched her husband break down in real time. The man she had been married to for 15 years was revealing a side of his personality she had never seen or perhaps never wanted to see. "Richard," she said softly, "David isn't just my best friend. He's our children's godfather. He was at our wedding. He helped me get my first job." Her voice broke slightly. "How could you do this to him?" One of the officers approached Richard. "Sir, we need you to come with us to give a statement about the assault." Several people recorded the incident. "Wait," Richard pleaded, turning to David with growing desperation. "Please, you don't understand. I have a family, children, a career." This was a terrible misunderstanding. David studied him for a long moment, his expression inscrutably calm. "Richard, I'm going to ask you a simple question. If I were really who you thought I was, a black man with no money or connections, would you feel the same need to apologize?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Richard opened and closed his mouth several times, clearly struggling with a response that everyone already knew. "That's exactly it," David said softly. "You're only sorry because you found out I can fight back, not because you recognize that what you did was fundamentally wrong." Crawford hung up the phone, his face pale. "David, I spoke with our president. Obviously, Richard is fired effective immediately, but about our contract." David smiled, and it was a smile that made Richard feel as if the world was falling out from under his feet. "James, interesting that you should mention that. You see, I was actually coming here today to discuss the early renewal of our contract. I was thinking of expanding our services, perhaps doubling the value of the agreement." Richard's heart stopped. If Platinum Fashion lost Williams Tech Solutions, it wouldn't just be him who suffered. It would be a corporate disaster that would affect hundreds of jobs. "I've been thinking," David continued casually. "But now I need to consider whether I want to continue to be associated with a company whose employees find it acceptable to assault customers based on the color of their skin." Crawford looked like he was on the verge of a heart attack. "David, please. This was a rogue employee acting on his own. The company does not tolerate." The company promoted that rogue employee to regional manager, David observed. "The company gave him the authority to represent its values. The company trained him, supervised him, evaluated him positively for years." He paused. "That makes me wonder what other rogue employees might be in leadership positions." Richard finally understood the full magnitude of what he had done. Not only had he destroyed his own career, he had potentially damaged the entire company, all of his colleagues, hundreds of families who depended on those jobs. "Please," Richard whispered, tears welling up in his eyes. "I beg you, my children, my wife." Catherine recoiled from him in disgust. "Don't use me as an excuse for your actions, Richard. What about our children?" She paused, looking directly into his eyes. "They deserve to know who their father really is." As the police officers approached to take Richard away, David did something no one expected. He approached the man who had assaulted him and spoke quietly so that only Richard could hear. "Richard, I'm going to give you some free advice. Use this moment to really reflect on who you are and who you want to be. Because the person you revealed yourself to be today is not someone your own children should look up to." That's when the true magnitude of the destruction Richard had caused began to sink in. Not just in his professional world, but in something even more fundamental and irreversible. 6 months later, David Williams walked through the same Beverly Center where it all had happened. The former Platinum Fashion store was closed with a space available for rent sign plastered across the dusty window. Williams Tech Solutions had canceled the multi-million-dollar contract, causing a domino effect that resulted in the closure of 3 stores in the area. James Crawford had managed to keep only the downtown locations open, laying off 200 employees in the process. Richard Morrison, meanwhile, found that finding a job in retail after a viral video of racial assault was no easy task. His own wife, Catherine, had filed for divorce, taking the children to live with her sister in another state. "I can't look at you anymore without seeing the man who assaulted my best friend," she said during their last conversation. Marcus, the former store security guard, now worked at Williams Tech Solutions headquarters as a security coordinator with a salary 3 times higher and health insurance for his entire family. "Mr. Williams gave me a chance when no one else believed in me," he told his colleagues, still incredulous at the turnaround in his life. David stopped in front of the place where Richard had assaulted him, watching families of all colors shopping peacefully. His company now sponsored a scholarship program for young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged communities, turning that moment of pain into fuel for real change. His cell phone vibrated with a message from Catherine. "David, thank you for helping me see who Richard really was. The kids asked if you're coming to Sophie's 10th birthday party next month." He smiled as he typed back, "I wouldn't miss it for the world. Godfather always present." The best revenge David had learned was not to destroy those who hurt him, but to build something greater than his oppressors could ever imagine. Richard tried to humiliate him for his color and apparent social status, but ended up revealing his own smallness to the whole world. If you've ever faced prejudice or injustice, remember your dignity is your greatest strength and success is always the most eloquent response. Subscribe to Black Voices for more stories that prove that those who sow prejudice reap consequences.